start at any time.
Huh?
You can start at any time.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the final meeting of the Sunset Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission. We will first call the roll. For those members attending virtually, please turn on your cameras and respond when you hear your name. Mr. Jameson, if you would please call the roll.
Senator Lang.
Here.
Senator Pickard. Senator Spearman. Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Miss Rankin.
Here.
Miss Brown. Mr. Cheney. Chair Howdigy.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Jameson, please indicate we have a quorum. Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to go over some basic housekeeping items. First, for everyone here in attendance, both members and those out in the audience, I would like to remind you to please turn off all cell phones and laptops during the meeting. For those joining on Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize background noise. Members on Zoom, please remember to keep your video turned on during the meeting to ensure that we have a quorum. For the individuals on Zoom, I would like to remind you that the chat feature is only to be used for technical assistance with BPS. It is not to be used for any communication between members or by presenters unless requesting technical assistance. Witnesses who wish to provide the subcommittee members with additional information or have their complete testimony or handouts included in the permanent record should provide a paper or electronic copy to the committee secretary. If you wish to testify in person, please sign in at the table by the door and leave a business card. When testifying, please remember to turn on your microphone and clearly state your name and entity you represent at the beginning of your testimony. Meeting materials provided by the subcommittee members for this meeting can be accessed on the subcommittee's webpage. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification of and access to the subcommittee's agendas, minutes, and final report can do so by going to the Nevada Legislature's website. With that, let us get started with our first agenda item, which is public comment. As noted on the agenda, public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. There will be a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting and another public comment period at the end of the meeting. In addition to testifying in person, members of the public may provide public comment in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. You can email your comments, mail your comments, and fax your comments. And for those listening online, you can also call 1-669-900-6833 and enter today's meeting ID, which is 897-0257-9215, and then press the pound sign. We will start with public comment from those physically present down here in Las Vegas. Then we will move to those in Carson City, followed by those on the telephone line. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City who would like to provide public comment? Okay, BPS, could we check the telephone line for anyone wishing to provide public comment?
Thank you, Chair. Your public line is open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you, BPS. Okay, committee members, that moves us on to our next agenda item. Agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes of the meeting on April 20th, 2022. At this time, I will accept a motion to approve the minutes. I have a motion from Vice Chair Spearman. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second from Assemblywoman Marzola. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. If you are on Zoom, please raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, thank you, committee members. Okay, agenda item number 4 is a presentation from the State Barbers Health and Sanitation Board. If you recall, at our meeting On January 26, 2022, we received a presentation from the board regarding the modernization of the board's operations and additional items requested by the 2019-2020 Interim Subcommittee. At the conclusion of this presentation, several of our subcommittee members asked that the board report back on a few items. Those items were: 1, the possibility of making the testing timeline shorter. At the January meeting, the board reported that testing is held every 3 to 4 weeks. 2, whether the local barber schools accepted United States Department of Veteran Affairs GI Bill benefits. And 3, the possibility of increasing licensure by endorsement. I believe we have Ms. Antoinette Maestas from the State Barbers Board on Zoom to discuss the board's progress. Ms. Maestas, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. When you are ready, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the Sunset Committee, my name is Antoinette Maestas. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Nevada State Barbers Health and Sanitation Board. I'm here to report on behalf of the Nevada State Barbers Health and Sanitation Board. At the meeting held January 26th, I reported to the committee that the board had completed 4 of the 5 requests that the committee had asked for. Our website was developed and is a working tool for the board and licensees. Modernization of practices is being done. We are offering all of our meetings in person or teleconference. Cooperation with the Cosmetology Board. We've been working with the Cosmetology Board when problems arise or questions we may have. Payments to be made online are being done. We just went through renewal of licensees and we had a great response to our online services. The increase of frequency of testing. We're currently testing about every 4 weeks. The board has worked on this diligently. After consulting testing agencies, because of our low numbers of candidates, it would cost the candidates anywhere from $300 to $350 to take an exam through testing companies. The candidates are now paying $100 to take the exam. This is a bigger increase for the candidates taking the examination. I have done extensive research and found that our neighboring states may test every day, but there are long waits to be able to test. We never turn anyone away from examining if they have their paperwork all in by the deadline set. I have reached out to our neighboring states, and I found that with New Mexico, they test every day with a third-party agency. As of May 25th, I tried to schedule an exam with them. The earliest I could schedule was June 14th. That was a waiting period of 20 days. Arizona tests 6 times a year. They test in January, March, May, July, September, and November. California, they test every day, but it's kind of crazy the way their system works. You submit your application. There's at least a 6-week waiting period for that to get approved. Once it's approved, they notify the candidate, and then they can schedule for the exam. Utah is about the same as California. They have to get the application approved, and then there's a waiting period. Colorado, they test, they use a third-party testing agency, and as of May 25th, the earliest I could schedule an exam was the written I could schedule on June 3rd and the practical on June 6th. Our board examines both written and practical the same day so that the candidate is finished the same day. I went back and researched the last 6 months of our testing. The average wait time was 13 days from graduating to testing. In that same time frame, we had 107 students apply to examine, and only 78 of them took the exam. I think I had said this in the last meeting that once they graduate, they're not all in such a hurry to take their exam, and this proves that. There were only 29 that showed up to take the exam. Out of the 78 that took the exam, we had 64 that passed the exam, 13 that failed. Out of the 13 that failed the exam, 5 were from out-of-state schools. Out of the 78 that were tested, there were 42 students that did not take the exam as soon as they graduated from school. Out of the 13 that failed the examination, 1 candidate graduated 4 days prior to the test, 1 candidate graduated 9 days prior to the exam, and the rest graduated from 2 months to 2.5 years prior to testing. Please keep in mind that the exams are offered every month, but some of the students choose not to examine right out of school. I've spoken to different schools and asked why these students are not testing immediately upon graduating, and the answer is always the same. They want to be prepared. At the last Sunset Committee meeting, the question was asked why the Barber schools didn't accept the VA education benefits. I explained that the Barber schools we have in Nevada are privately owned, but I would do the research and find out what was needed to qualify them to accept the benefits. I sent letters to all the Barber schools in Nevada and gave them the information of who to contact for the application. After speaking with the individual over the VA benefits in our state, they let me know that there had been Barber schools in the past to reach out to them, and they elected not to proceed. They explained to me that it is a financial risk if a student drops out. They explained that over the last 3 years, the regulations behind the VA education benefit program have been more stringent and difficult to navigate. They have seen a number of small institutes withdraw due to the increase of criteria. They did tell me that they're there to help navigate the system and they would help the schools. So with that being said, the information was passed on to all the Barber schools in Nevada. The board has worked to achieve everything that was asked of us. The board continues to strive to make things better and more efficient. In closing, I hope that this has been able to shed some light on the testing situation. And as always, feel free to reach out to me if there are any questions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the members would have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mastas, for being here and for your presentation. I'm going to go ahead and turn to the committee members for questions. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Mastas, for the for the report. Just a question. So the VA, I think you said that they said if the student drops out, that the school has some financial obligation, or is it some financial risk?
That's what I was told from the director that I talked to. Yes.
The director at the VA, and I'm just trying to understand, because one of the reasons that a lot of people will take VA is because they know that the student will be able to complete the course, and once the money has been issued to the school, most of the time it's not withdrawn unless there are really, really, really good reasons.
Correct. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who I spoke to. It's through Peter.
No, I don't need the name. I just need the position. The position of the person at the VA that you spoke to that told you that the school would be on the hook for the rest of the money.
It just said it's a financial risk if a student drops out. What I was told is they have to pay that. The school would have to pay that back to the VA if the student drops out.
And so, I mean, I'm just trying to understand what office at the VA said that to you.
This was through Dieter that I spoke to, the person that handles that, through Dieter.
Okay. I was just asking because I want to follow up on that, okay?
Correct. I understand. No,
Okay.
I gathered all the information. I sent a letter out to all the schools, gave them the number, the contact, how to do it. I do know that one of our schools has reached out to this individual. I don't know what happened with it, or if they're moving forward with that or not. I mean, I would like to see that happen. I think it's a great program to help benefit the VAs.
Yeah, so,
And the person that I did.
Go on.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
The person that I did speak to was very helpful and said she would be more than willing to help them through the process of the application.
Okay. So the other question, I know that during the last 2.5 years, and maybe even a little bit before that, there have been some extenuating circumstances for most people who are trying to either move into a career or move into a second career. So my question would be this. Some schools are offering an outreach program, so when people are having difficulty either financially or otherwise, and with the way that rent prices are going up now, many people are not able to do a lot of things because every dime that they make goes to rent. So do you all have any type of an outreach program that would, for the students who graduate, and then it's a little bit longer than than is expected for them to take the test. Is there any way that to follow up with them to see if there are some other extenuating circumstances going on? Because sometimes the schools may be the only link that they have to get the help that they know they need. They just don't know where to go and get it.
We do not have an outreach program like that. The schools, they have the contact that those students could go to get help. And I know that the state has paid for some exams through Dieter, for one. I know that they've done that for students before.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for your questions. Committee members, any other questions? And I believe Senator Lang has her hand up. Senator Lang?
Thank you, Chair. My question is kind of outside the purview of exactly what we're talking about, but I'm just curious, on the Barber Board, do you also cover the schools? Are you responsible for the schools, or are they under a different agency?
We are responsible for the schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Committee members, last call. Okay, thank you, Ms. Mestas, for being here and answering questions. We appreciate you.
Not a problem. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, committee members, this brings us right into our next agenda item. This is our final work session for this Sunset Subcommittee, this Interim Sunset Subcommittee. As a reminder, this subcommittee is charged with reviewing existing boards and commissions and making recommendations regarding their future. Our next order of business is to consider recommendations for some of the boards and commissions that we reviewed throughout our previous meetings. For each entity, the work session document presents options or actions for consideration by the members. It is intended to assist the members in determining whether to recommend that a board or commission be continued, terminated, modified, or consolidated with another entity. As a result of the subcommittee's consideration today, each item may be the subject of further discussion, refinement, or action. The work session document was posted with the agenda on the legislature's website. The work session document contains standard language that asks the members to consider the possible recommendations. In some instances, it also includes suggested actions. These are presented for discussion purposes and do not in any way limit the range of options available to the members. With that, I am going to turn to our subcommittee staff to open the work session. Mr. Malgarejo, let's begin, and I'm going to make a request that we go through items 1 and 2 together. It is my understanding, after running this by legal, that we can take one motion for work session item number 1 and work session item number 2, which is the Nevada Transportation Authority and the Taxi Cab Authority. So, Mr. Malgarejo, if you would please maybe walk us through both of those, and then we will open it to discussion with the committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. And as nonpartisan staff, I can neither advocate for nor against a measure that comes before this subcommittee. I will provide a short overview of the work session document, and starting with items number 1 and 2, as the chair stated. The first and second entity on the work session is the Nevada Transportation Authority and the Taxi Cab Authority. The NTA regulates certain motor carriers, operators of tow cars, brokers of regulated carriers, transportation network companies, autonomous vehicle network companies, and the storage of household goods and effects. The NTA also regulates taxi cabs outside of Clark County, while the Taxi Cab Authority regulates the operations of taxi cabs within Clark County. The Sunset Subcommittee previously reviewed the NTA and the TA during the 2015-2016 interim and recommended terminating and consolidating the functions of the NTA with the TA in a new executive department. On November 2nd, 2016, the Sunset Subcommittee presented its report and recommendations to the Legislative Commission. Subcommittee's recommendation to consolidate the NTA and the TA was considered and omitted from the motion to direct the Legal Division LCB to prepare bill draft request on behalf of the Sunset Subcommittee. Subcommittee once again reviewed the NTA and the TA this interim at its meeting on May 18, 2022. Director Reynolds of the Department of Business and Industry testified that there is a need to modernize both the NTA and the TA and the laws that govern them. He recommended a legislative study to review the transportation laws administered by the NTA and the TA. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the Nevada Transportation Authority and the Taxi Cab Authority? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation or a recommendation to have the authority's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the NTA and the TA, does the subcommittee recommend any changes to these authorities? And Madam Chair, Director Reynolds, Ms. Gibbons, Chair of the NTA, Mr. Reeser, Chair of the TA, are on Zoom, and Mr. Armstrong is with us here in Las Vegas to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo, and thank you, Mr. Armstrong, for being here as well. Committee, if you recall, during our last meeting, we were given insight into the need for modernization of the chapters that govern the NTA and the TA. After discussions with Director Reynolds, it is my recommendation to request an interim study and that the study be conducted through a legislative committee, such as the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. So at this time, I would like for us to consider a motion to draft a concurrent resolution to direct the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure to conduct a study to review the laws administered by the NTA and the Taxi Cab Authority during the 2023-2024 interim. I do want to open it up to discussion before we take a motion to see if anyone has any questions for either Mr. Armstrong, who's here with us in Las Vegas, or for any of the members who are joining us via Zoom. I believe we have lost Assemblywoman Marzola, but we have Senator Lang up in Carson City. So Senator Lang, Vice Chair, or Assemblymember Kasama, any questions? Vice Chair?
Maybe not so much a question as it is, well, maybe it is. If the consolidation were to occur, what would be the benefits and what would be the liabilities?
The question is who exactly are you directing the question to? Are you directing it to the NTA or the TA? Or I'll start with the TA in terms of what we're talking about. At this particular point, we have laws that we still need to revise, review. We're in the process of doing that. As a matter of fact, we're going to have an unofficial work session on June 15th in order to continue our process of trying to review the regulations as well as the laws that affect the TA in terms of this situation. We want to get those in order before anything is done relative to making a determination as to whether the TA or the NTA should be put together, because I think both of us need to get our houses in order for us to make the determination. That's the reason why I agree with the analysis of the chair as to putting this into an interim study committee situation so that we can get everything together and make a reasonable determination as to whether or not these entities should be put together and what are the pros and cons in that matter.
Thank you, because the thing that comes to mind immediately is if there's consolidation and we're talking about improving, and I think part of the discussion last time dealt with some technology that is in play now and that will be coming into play, and making sure that whatever we talk about takes in consideration 5-10 years down the road. We may not know everything about it, but some of the things that we do know is that there will be different modes of transportation introduced, and there will be different ways that people will be transported, if you will. So to try to make sure that is taken into consideration. So I wanted to know, and maybe that's one of the questions that the study could answer. Look at the pros and the cons of it. Yeah. The biggest concern that I would have, and as you said, you have an unofficial meeting, but that's still going to be covered.
Yes, we do. We're in the process of doing a workshop session in order to look at our laws and look at our regulations to update and modernize those. Some of those regulations were in effect in the 70s. So to a certain extent, we're doing a comprehensive review of the entire process.
Yeah, because so it's a work session, not an unofficial.
It's an unofficial work session for us because we don't have anything ready to be presented to the board for, or to the legislature in terms of BDR relative to that. We're talking at this particular point with the industry about what we need to do in order, like you say, to modernize and do the things that we do that we're statutorily required to do.
Yeah. If I may just make a suggestion, if you haven't considered, look at the role of autonomous vehicles.
Yes, that is part
and-
of it too,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, and what that looks like in terms of infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I would like the public and the committee members to know that there is exhibits on the website of examples of NRS and NAC that were provided to us of things that could be modernized. So if anyone wants to take a look at those. But again, the committee members, I'm doing a last call for discussion or questions. Senator Lang, raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay, well, then I would be looking for a motion to draft a concurrent resolution to direct the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure to conduct a study to review the laws administered by the NTA and Taxi Cab Authority during the 2023-2024 interim.
So
I have a
moved.
motion by Vice Chair.
A second?
I have a motion by Vice Chair and a second by Senator Lang. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Reeser, Ms. Gibbons, and Mr. Armstrong for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, the next item on the work session agenda is the Merit Award Board. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Melgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. The next entity is the Merit Award Board. The board and the Merit Award Program were established by the legislature in 1967. The board reviews proposals from state employees that would reduce or eliminate state expenditures or improve the operations of state government. The board evaluates the merits of these suggestions. Subcommittee previously reviewed the board on March 15, 2016, and recommended its continuation with various statutory provisions being changed. These recommendations were adopted through Senate Bill 72 in the 2017 session. The board was reviewed this interim by the Sunset Subcommittee at its meeting on February 16, 2022. At that time, representatives of the board stated that the board was not funded for the 21-23 biennium, and in the Sunset Subcommittee review form, the Division of Human Resource Management reported that without the budgetary authority to fund awards, the HRM suggests that it is advisable to align the statute with budget realities. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the board? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the board's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the the board, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the board? Chair Howdigi, we have Director Freed from the Department of Administration in Carson City, and Administrator Richardson and Deputy Administrator Gan from DHRM on Zoom to address any questions about this board.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malgarejo. And thank you, committee members. I know it's been a while since we reviewed the Merit Award Board, so just some information I'd like to provide to the committee members. NRS 285.070 authorizes the board to award a state employee up to $5,000, and anything above $5,000 must be approved by Interim Finance Committee. According to our Assembly Fiscal Division, the general fund appropriations that have been provided over the last 10 years for the Merit Award Program have been on average about $1,100 a year. So a very minimal cost to the state. But as I sat back and I thought about the awards that families received, and especially any program that rewards our state employees who continuously sacrifice for our state, is something that we should protect. Our state employees are working in these divisions and these departments day in and day out and are best equipped to be able to identify things that could make their offices run more efficiently. And they're the ones who receive the Merit Award. You know, it's these state employees, these individuals who go above and beyond their role at work to identify practices that would make their offices run better. It would be my recommendation for continuation of the Merit Award Board with a request to fund the admin account with $3,000 biannually. Again, they've been running off $1,100 a year, so $3,000 biannually. And it would also be my recommendation to amend Chapter 285 to allow for general fund usage and to create an award account as well, funded with $25,000 of general fund that, if unused, shall be reverted to the general fund at the end of the biennium. I do want to open it up now to committee members if there are any questions on this item before us. I would also like to point out to our committee secretary that Senator Pickard has joined us as well. Okay, so committee members, any discussion, any questions? We do have representatives here to answer any questions. Vice Chair.
I'm not trying to dominate, but Madam Chair, I would agree, and I would just like to add this for the record. You're absolutely correct. Our state employees go above and beyond, and there were several years that they were asked to take furlough, which was indeed a drop in pay, and there were 2 or 3 sessions I know that the legislature reduced our pay so it could go back to them. And I just want to say to the state employees, you all are doing a yeoman's job, and sometimes we hear people say things that government's too big and it costs too much. And most of the times people that say that are the same ones who complain when they can't get a real live person on the phone. So thank you all for what you do, and I'd be in complete support of your proposal.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I know we also have a question or a comment from Senator Ling.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo your comments and now the comments of the Vice Chair. Our state workers do so much for us all the time, and I just really feel that this needs to continue, and I'm 100% in favor of it.
Thank you, Senator Lang. Committee members? Okay, then again, I would repeat my motion, just restate it for the record, but it's my recommendation, and I'd be looking for a motion for continuation of the Merit Award Board with a request to fund the admin account with $3,000 biannually, and to amend Chapter 285 to allow for general fund usage, and create an award account funded with $25,000 of general funds that shall be reverted to the general fund if they are unused during the biennium. I have a motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second? I have a second by Assemblymember Kasama. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, I have an aye from Senator Pickard, who raised his hand as well. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, and thank you to our state employees as well. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 4, the Advisory Council on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. The Advisory Council on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics is next in the work session document. The Advisory Council on STEM currently resides under the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology, better known as OSIT, within the Office of the Governor. The mission of the Council is to increase student interest and achievement in the fields of STEM, leading students to rewarding careers in the new Nevada economy. The Council is charged with developing a statewide strategic plan for STEM, identifying and awarding recognition to students in schools throughout Nevada that excel in STEM, conducting surveys and research, and applying for grants. The Council was reviewed for the first time by the Sunset Subcommittee on March 30th, 2022. During the review, the representatives of the Council discussed several challenges with the Council that the Council has had over the years. In addition, after the March 30 meeting, OSIT notified subcommittee staff that it would recommend terminating the Council. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the Council? If subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the Council's duties transferred to another entity? If subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the Council, does subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the Council? Chair Jauregui, we have Tracy Howard, the STEM Program Director from OSIT, is on Zoom to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And again, committee members, thank you again, because I know it has been a while since we reviewed the Advisory Council. After just many discussions, we've reached out to the Nevada Department of Education. Again, we've reached out to OSET, and what we learned during our committee hearing when we reviewed the advisory council is that one of the things that came out during COVID was the birth of the new division department that kind of took over a lot of these functions. It was, the Blue Ribbon Commission. And we sunsetted a similar program during our last committee meeting because, again, the Blue Ribbon Commission kind of assumed the roles and responsibilities that were being provided by that program and also by the advisory council, which is right now ineffective since its functions are being performed by another entity. So it would be my recommendation to terminate the advisory council and to have the Blue Ribbon Commission continue with the functions of the advisory council. We do have Tracy Howard here again to help answer any questions because I understand that it has been a while since we've reviewed them. So committee members, any questions? Senator Lang and Senator Pickard, I'm going to do a check-in with you. Any questions? Okay, then I'd be looking for a motion for termination. I have a motion by Assemblywoman Kasama. Do I have a second? I have a second by Vice Chair. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee members. Item number 5 on the work session is the Advisory Committee to the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission. Before I turn it over to Mr. Malgarejo, thank you, Mr. Malgarejo, I do want to make a couple comments regarding the Advisory Committee to the Juvenile Justice Oversight and the next agenda item on work session, which is number 6, the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission. We reviewed both of these entities. We kind of had an overview during the advisory committee hearing, and then we had the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission come back so that we could work session them as well. I want to point out to the committee that there are discussions between the Supreme Court and the governor's office to consolidate some programs that exist in duplication. So we currently have the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission under the Department of HHS, and the Supreme Court has a similar program as well. So there is a BDR that has been submitted to consolidate those two into one entity. With that, comes my recommendation for item number 5, which would be to terminate the advisory committee. And because the BDR has not been put in place, it was going to be my recommendation to continue the oversight commission because federally we need it to receive funds until the BDR goes through in 2023. That consolidates the two. So I wanted to take a moment to give you guys some insight before we jumped into the advisory committee work session document. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, says our Malgarejo Committee Policy Analyst. I really don't have much more input to provide, Madam Chair. However, I did want to ask if you wanted to go ahead and take both of these motions together. That might be a possibility. And then also just to notify you, we do have several individuals in Carson City. We have Administrator Pitlock and Administrator Anderson from the Division of Child and Family Services, and I believe we have one more individual on Zoom that is available to answer any questions.
Oh, Mr. Malgarejo, would we be able to take them in one motion? Can we? Should I check with Ms. O'Grady? Ms. O'Grady?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Okay, committee members, that was I guess my insight worked, but after my discussions with the governor's office and again the Supreme Court, this was something that they were already working on, was the consolidation so that there is no duplication. So it would be my recommendation then, and I would be looking for a motion to terminate the advisory committee to the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission, and because we need to continue the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission in order to receive federal funding until the consolidation occurs, it would be my recommendation to continue the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission. Again, if anyone has any questions regarding the discussions that are going on to consolidate with the Supreme Court program, we do have administrators here to answer. Committee members? Okay, it looks like I have a motion from Vice Chair. Well, seeing no questions, it looks like I have a motion from Vice Chair. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblywoman Kasama. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee members. Okay, our next item is item number 7, the Advisory Council for Family Engagement. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The council is assigned to review parental involvement in family engagement policies, school district annual reports, and effective practices. It is also charged with identifying methods to improve outreach and communication with parents. The council is required to report annually to the legislature on its activities and any recommendations for legislation. The council consists of 11 members, 9 who are appointed by the superintendent of instruction, and 2 who are appointed by who are legislators appointed by Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the Assembly. The Sunset Subcommittee previously reviewed the council during the 2015-2016 interim. The subcommittee recommended continuation of the council with statutory revisions, including revising the name of the council, modifying the council's annual reporting requirements. The recommendations were adopted through the 2017 session with the passage of SB 301. Sunset Subcommittee again reviewed the council at the May 18, 2022 meeting. At this time, and in the Sunset Subcommittee form, representatives of the council recommended amending the membership of the council to authorize the Speaker of the Assembly and the Majority Leader of the Senate to appoint any designee rather than member of the Assembly or Senate, respectively. The question before the subcommittee is: the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the council? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity, or a recommendation to have the council's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the council, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the council? Chair Jauregui, Alberto Quintero from the Office of Parental Involvement and Family Engagement is available on Zoom to discuss this council.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malgarejo. Committee members, we reviewed this council at our last committee meeting, if you recall, and there had been discussions about the difficulties in filling some of the seats. After discussions with the Nevada Department of Education, again, this is a council that is really important, and I had made the recommendation, well, do we need to reduce maybe some of the parental numbers? And they felt that parental engagement is of the utmost importance to this council, and so I think we need to leave the makeup of the council the same, but in order to make sure that they have a quorum and they are available and able to meet, it would be my recommendation, and I would be seeking a motion to recommend continuation of the Advisory Council for Family Engagement with an amendment to NRS 385.610 to require the council to, within 60 days before the beginning of the term of any member appointed to the council, or within 30 days after such a position becomes vacant, they must submit notification of a vacancy to the appointing authority, either the superintendent of public instruction or legislative leadership, in order to fill those seats within a timely manner so that the council can meet and perform its functions. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Quintero? Senator Pickard?
Madam Chair, if I could just ask a quick question.
Yes, Senator,
I noticed
please.
the work session document talks about the suggestion that the majority leader and the Speaker of the Assembly be allowed to appoint a designee rather than a member of the legislature. You didn't mention that in your motion, which I think is probably a good thing. Because I thought that the discussion was that this is a really critically important activity, and I think that the connection with the legislature, having legislative members actually participate, and maybe that's a challenge for leadership to find a member that is willing to do so. But I agree with your comment that this is a critically important feature because parental involvement is one of the contributing factors to many of the problems that we see in education today, or the lack of that engagement. But you didn't mention it, so if you're leaving that part out, I'm happy to make the motion. I think this is a critical activity.
Thank you, Senator Pickard. And yes, that was intentionally left out. I think legislature participation and oversight is always critically important. Again, we can make recommendations to amend the statutes. And so I think it's always important that we participate and are a part of the conversation as well. So yes, I will take that as a motion then. We have a
I
motion
will
from
make the
Senator
motion.
Pickard.
Thank you.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Vice Chair. Any discussion on the motion? I have a Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. I certainly agree with Senator Pickard with your analysis that parental involvement is quite important. The one thing, and I don't want to amend the motion or anything of that nature, but the one thing I want to put on record is that we've got to make sure that any discussion about parental involvement must include workforce development, as well as employer input, because we are in down here anyway, it's a 24/7 town. And so somebody's at the blackjack table at 2 o'clock in the morning, and those somebodies often have children. And somebody's at the blackjack table at 9 o'clock at night, and those somebodies probably have children. And I'm saying that to say that often what we do when we talk about parental engagement or family engagement, it's convenient for 9 to 5, but inconvenient for those who work either swing or mid. So whatever the committee does, I think there should be some consideration to the fact that they probably have parents that work for a living, not a hobby, and we have to make sure that we're accommodating them. If not accommodating them in deed, then accommodating in spirit, so that they don't get castigated because they're not attending a school function or they're not attending a meeting. And the reason that they're not attending it is because they're working. So we have to decide what we want to do. We want parents to work to provide a living for their families, or are we going to castigate them and push them out on social services? Those are my comments, and I just want to make sure that we consider that and keep that in mind, and remember that just because a parent is not involved doesn't mean that they don't care. Many times it means that they are not a family of means, and they've got to work to make sure that their family is existing. So,
thank you, Vice Chair. Assemblywoman Kasama.
Yes, can you remind me what the Nevada Department of Education actually recommended terminating the network because they already feel they're doing that with their Blue Ribbon Commission?
I believe you're on the next agenda item, Assemblywoman Kasama. We're on number 7, the Advisory Council, and I believe you might be talking about the Competency-Based Education
Oh, I'm
Network.
sorry. So sorry. Yes.
No worries. Okay. Again, I have the motion from Senator Pickard, and I have a second from Vice Chair. We took discussion, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee. Now we will move on to number 8, which is the Competency-Based Education Network. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. Next is the Competency-Based Education Network. The network was established in 2017 alongside a competency-based education pilot program. The pilot program allows schools to explore the use of competency-based education in classrooms. The task of the network is to study how competency-based education could be offered across the state of Nevada. The network was reviewed by the Sunset Subcommittee at its meeting on May 18th, 2022. At that time, representatives of the Nevada Department of Education recommended terminating the network since the superintendent's Blue Ribbon Commission for Globally Prepared Nevada and the relevant NDE programs are currently carrying out the charge of the network. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the network? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity, or a recommendation to have the network's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuation of the network, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the network? And Chair Jauregui, I believe Director Brandkamp from the Office of Standards and Instructional Support from NDE is available in Carson City to discuss the network.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And committee members, we reviewed the Competency-Based Education Network at our last committee meeting. And if you remember, and they've talked a little bit about that, this was put into statute and the network was created just for the purposes of creating this pilot program. And the network has fulfilled its legislative requirements and duties, and they will be and created the pilot program, and they will be producing their final report soon. And so it was the request that they be terminated, but the functions that were created out of the pilot program would continue under the oversight of the Blue Ribbon Commission. We do have Director Vacant here, so I'm going to turn to Assemblywoman Kasama. I know you had a question, so I think this would be the perfect time to answer.
Well, it sounds like we're moving in that direction, so sorry, I was ahead of the game.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just want to make sure that all questions are answered. So I'm going to turn to the committee members to see if anyone has questions. Senator Lang, Senator Pickard? Senator Marzola? Oh, Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I talked to a couple of individuals that have participated, and maybe tangentially. I didn't really get into the details of their participation. But I wanted to better understand what the network, what terminating the network would look like, what it would do to the broader competency-based education effort. My understanding from those conversations is that the Blue Ribbon Commission is focusing on things much broader than competency-based education, that this would become a small subset of their broader mission. And so I'm really concerned, having been a vocational teacher when I was teaching, and my entire curriculum was based on competencies that had to be achieved in order to progress. You know, and when we were talking about competency-based education in the 2017 legislature, I think that across the different bills that covered it, there was a recognition that competency-based education could work in a lot of different contexts. And so anyway, the result of the conversations were just that, you know, we haven't really done much with this network. We've established the pilot programs, which some weren't really undertaken with the kind of zeal that I think we anticipated. And so at the end of the day, the pilot programs in some of the districts were successful, and others were kind of underwhelming. So I didn't get the sense anyway, and certainly after the presentation we got in the last hearing, I didn't really get the sense that while, you know, the leadership took it seriously, it just didn't seem to get much of the attention that maybe it should have. And you know, competency-based education is more than what it used to be when I was teaching. The idea really comes down to what can we do to allow students to progress at their pace instead of pigeonholing them in with the group and then limiting their participation because they either get bored or they could have done more ultimately. So I'm not really comfortable with the idea of terminating the program per se. What I think we ought to do is probably continue it with a mandate to try to implement the pilot program in a more substantive way, at least try to do more with what we had. Because I think that this avenue of teaching, of instruction and progression is critical. I don't think we do it well enough. And so I'm leaning against terminating this.
Thank you, Senator Pickard. And I believe we do have Director Vacant here. Director Vacant, can you walk us through? So we're sunsetting the network, which was created in statute to create this pilot program and then send back a report, right? So by terminating the network, it's not terminating the pilot programs. The pilot programs will continue to exist as they have been created. It's just the network that was supposed to study it and then give us a final report that's being terminated. So could you walk us through what happens if we sunset the network and how the pilot programs will continue to exist and be funded?
Dave Brandkamp, for the record, Director of the Office of Standards and Instructional Support at the Department of Education, Chair, members of the committee. So that you're 100% right. That was its intent when the bill was set and the pilot set. Currently, the department is working with a group called Knowledge Works to expand the pilot so that we can get other schools involved. In my office, Mary Holsclaw is one of her jobs as the education program professional is the oversight of this network. But now, as we're expanding out, any of the schools that are looking at other innovative ways to have students have an exploration of their educational experience. The pilots will continue. Mary Holsclaw, through my office, will continue to support them now, probably not in the term of a pilot, so that we can continue to grow that. As of today, what we are aware of with working with KnowledgeWorks, that there are at least 6 other districts looking at either schools or a school within a school to try to jump into this program, which we're excited about to have that expand. So it will continue. There was no funding to them through this bill in 2017 other than to try to, get the information out. So the schools don't receive any additional funding for taking on or looking at this idea of competency-based education. So that would be the other piece. There's nothing for them as far as a fiscal loss if we were to terminate that side. It's more just so that we could allow our group that all those members of the pilot are currently with our Blue Ribbon Task Force and are involved constantly with communication with us right now. And then as we bring on these hopefully additional schools, we've asked for them to join us as well.
Thank you, Director Brandtkamp. For Senator Pickard, so I just confirmed, just based on my conversations I had leading up to this work session, that by deleting the statute that deletes the network, we're not deleting the statute that deletes the pilot program. Those would still exist. It was just the statute that would remain if left ineffective because they fulfilled their legislative obligation, which was to provide the report of the pilot programs. So I'm not sure do you have any other follow-up questions?
I do, just one, and that is, my understanding was that the report was preliminary. We did not get a final report that covered all of the mandated deliverables from the original bill. And so
Correct.
That's probably part of my concern is that I had the sense that it wasn't actually completed. And so terminating before completion is problematic. Was I just misinformed?
Dave Brandtkamp, for the record.
And you're correct. Oh, sorry, Director Brandtkamp, I'll let you take over. But yes, Senator Pickard, correct. The report is overdue, but I believe Director Brandtkamp, can you again let us know when we can expect that final report?
Yeah, apologies, Chair. Director Brandtkamp, again, for the record. The report from the committee has been finalized by the committee. It is with Superintendent Ebert and Deputy Moore for their final review to submit to you. So the committee has signed off on it. They've approved it in their meeting. So it is now just in the final review with the department.
All right, Madam Chair, if I might just jump back in, Keith Pickard for the record. I think it's inappropriate to terminate the network before they finalize their report. If we're days away, maybe it won't matter. But I just think that we need to finish the project. We need to let it play out. And then if they don't have anything more to do, there's no necessity for us to terminate them if they're complete. I would suggest that we maybe table this until that report comes in. We can verify that it's met all of the requirements, all of the deliverables have been completed, and then we would take the vote.
Thank you, Senator Pickard, and I appreciate your concerns. And I just want to remind you that our work sessions are just recommendations, so they won't be terminated immediately. So our recommendations get put into a final report, and then I will have to go present them in front of the Legislative Commission, who then has to approve them. And then if they are approved, they come back as a BDR during the 2023 legislative session. So if at that time, I think they have not produced their final report. Oh, yeah, approve or amend. The Legislative Commission would approve or amend our recommendations. And at that time, once if a BDR is produced and we bring it to the 2023 legislative session and they haven't produced their final report, that BDR does not need to move forward. But if they have, then we've already started the process of, again, cleaning up the statutes for something that has fulfilled its legislative duty instead of waiting 2 years.
I certainly understand that impulse. I guess I'm just too much a rule follower. If we set up the rules, we set up the expectations, we really ought to follow through. But anyway, I'm not going to make a motion to table something that wouldn't be appropriate. But anyway, I've said enough. Thank you.
Director Brankamp, I have a question for you. When the report's submitted, who is the report submitted to and who's the reviewing entity?
Again, Dave Brankamp for the record, Director of our Office of Standards and Instructional Support. It is submitted to the Governor's Office and to the LCB for their review.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, Assemblywoman Kasama. Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if I can amend the motion, if we've done it.
No, yes, this is questions. We haven't gotten to a motion yet, so I'm.
So, no, the only other thing that I would say is that while they're looking into all of this, in 2019, we passed the National Guard Youth Challenge Program that I think is probably another option or another way to make sure that we're doing competency-based teaching or instruction. So just to make sure that that's included in the mix, whatever they do, just to make sure that that's included in the mix.
Okay, and I mean, the reality is, I mean, once they fulfill their legislative duty, there is no further requirements of the network. So if we leave them in statute, nothing happens. This will create more work for future chairs of the Interim Sunset Subcommittee. Okay, I'm going to go to Assemblywoman Kasama.
I make a recommendation to terminate based on the clarifications that I've heard from you and the department.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama. Committee members, so we have a motion to terminate. Do we have a second? I have a second from Vice Chair. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have, Committee Secretary, we have all those in favor with the exception of Senator Pickard in form of a nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Director Brankamp, for being here. And again, thank you for indulging the conversation, committee members. Again, I do want to remind everyone that we are just making recommendations here, and ultimately we have to take these and make our case in front of the Legislative Commission, who has the ultimate say in whether they approve the recommendations that came out of our committee or whether they want to amend the recommendations. And again, we've seen them not take all recommendations before in the past, as you've heard from our policy analyst. And if those that they do take still have to come before the 2023 legislative session. So thank you, committee members. And I think we have one item left on our work session document, which is the Committee on Testing for Intoxication. And so I will turn it over to our committee analyst, Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Melgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. The Committee on Testing for Intoxication was established in 1983 to certify and approve testing devices to determine the amount of alcohol in a person's blood, to keep a list of such approved devices, and to certify the individuals in the proper use of such devices. In 1993, the legislature amended the duties of the committee to certify devices for testing a person's breath to determine the percent by weight of alcohol in a person's breath. Today, the purpose of the committee is to certify and approve breath testing devices as being accurate and reliable to test for intoxication, to keep a list of such approved devices, and to certify individuals in the proper operation of such devices. The committee was reviewed by the Sunset Subcommittee for the first time at the March 30, 2022 meeting. During this meeting, representatives of the Department of Public Safety stated that the committee has met not more than 1 or 2 times per year, and the meeting schedule is primarily driven by the need to approve a new device. During the review of the committee, representatives of DPS stated the department is developing recommendations to amend NRS 284C.600 through 284C.640 to remove requirements which are no longer necessary and to expand the role of the committee to evaluate other types of impaired driving substance detection technologies and techniques. These recommendations have been submitted to the subcommittee and are attached to this work session document as attachment A. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the committee? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the committee's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the committee, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the committee? Chair Howdigi, Deputy Director Brugman, and Administrator Davey from DPS are available on Zoom to discuss the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And again, committee members, I know it's been a few meetings since we reviewed this committee, so I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to ask questions. I know that after reviewing the proposed BDR language, I do have some questions. I was more at ease after reading through the NRS and realizing that what they do is actually just make recommendations to the Department of Public Safety. So, and they're just looking to, again, expand a little bit from making recommendations on the concentration of alcohol, but adding in other impaired substances. And so I do have a question on just that language. And Deputy Director Brugman, if you want to jump in and answer this, the adding the language of or other impairing substances, could you kind of walk me through? I know you had mentioned that there's so much expertise within this committee that you guys want to be able to use it. And so what would be other impairing substances? What kind of other recommendations would you be looking to give? Oh, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, I think I've got it now. I am going to turn the question over to Amy Davey, who is my expert on this, but you know, we are dealing with polysubstance abuse now. And so we are looking for technology that will allow us to test for polysubstances, which will probably just tell us that polysubstances are in play. It may not even tell us which substances. So it could be prescription drugs and alcohol. It could be prescription drugs, alcohol, and something else entirely. It could be including marijuana and other drugs. But let me have Amy Davey clarify that for you because she is definitely my expert in traffic safety.
Sure. Good morning. This is Amy Davies from the Office of Traffic Safety. To specifically answer your question, what we're seeing is, yes, the scope of the committee has been focused on certifying equipment for detection of alcohol use in DUI. However, we're seeing an increase in multi-substance use and asking to consider whether the committee should be looking at new technologies that currently exist technologies that other states are using to allow public safety personnel, law enforcement personnel to use devices and technologies that detect other impairing substances. Specifically, in the conversation that's going on right now, and according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 24 states have statutes authorizing some form of oral fluid specimen use. Other terms include saliva and other bodily substances in DUI cases. And what we're seeing being in use in other states right now is oral fluid testing devices for cannabis use.
Thank you, Ms. Davey. And then just for clarification, I know I had this question, so I'm assuming maybe, I hope other members had it too. But polysubstances just means more than one?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, thank you. And just and with the language change, I just want to make sure, I don't want to assume anything. So with the recommendations that you're giving for the changes to the NRS, it would be again deleting some language that is no longer less necessary, but then adding in the language that would allow you to make recommendations regarding best practices, the use of new technologies, and these new technologies for not just the detecting alcohol, but also detecting other substances. And basically, this statute just allows you to give recommendations to the Department of Public Safety, and then they decide whether they implement your recommendations. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Nevada is the only state in the country that does not have a state toxicological testing laboratory. We use a number of local laboratories or private laboratories under contract. Those laboratories have different practices and standards for testing. So the committee for testing on testing for intoxication has really been used to to sort of provide that oversight role. And what we'd like to see is that they also be allowed to make recommendations on toxicological testing and create standards for testing outside of just alcohol testing in DUI. But you are correct. It is simply advisory, study, and recommendation based to the Department of Public Safety.
Thank you, Ms. Davey. Committee members, any other questions? Those on Zoom and in Carson City, questions? Okay, then committee, I would be my recommendation. I'd be looking for a motion to continue with the this committee with the statutory revisions provided by DPS in attachment A of the work session document.
So moved.
I have a motion by Senator Pickard. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Assemblywoman Marzola. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Okay, thank you, committee members. Well, that is the work session for the entities that we reviewed, but we still have a few items to take action on under the work session. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to our policy analyst to go over item B under our work session document. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Chair Jauregui. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. On May 18th, the subcommittee reviewed an update of the Board of Homeopathic Medical Examiners. The discussion between the subcommittee members and representatives of the board included a review of the board's expenditures, revenues, and debt, which is approximately $111,000 owed to the Office of the Attorney General, which has been accruing since 2004. Representatives of the board indicated that the board is making monthly payments of $1,500 to the OAG. In addition, the board reported that its annual revenue, which is mainly funded by issuing licenses and certificates, has had a relevant range of $25,000 and $35,000 over the last 2 decades. Before adjourning the meeting, subcommittee members noted that the legislature would benefit from receiving regular updates on the operations of the board. To that end, the subcommittee may consider sending a letter to the board requesting that it report back to the subcommittee during the 2023-2024 interim regarding the board's composition, as well as the 23 legislature. Madam Chair, we do have Mr. Charles Green, Secretary Treasurer of the Nevada Board of Homeopathic Medical Examiners here in Las Vegas with us if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Margarejo. Committee members, I believe, and Senator Pickard, I believe this was pointed out by you at our last meeting. And so if you want to turn it over to you first to see if you have any questions or if you'd like to make the motion to request the letter to the board that they report back to the subcommittee during the 2023-24 interim regarding the board's composition, licensing, operations, and the status of its debt owed to the OAG.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the recognition. This is one thing that actually Senator Spearman and I have been dealing with since we both got on this subcommittee many years ago. I do think that it's important to ask them to report back during the next interim. I think that we should also consider, not necessarily in a formal letter, but at least in the record for the AG's office to consider, is that I think that some of their billing practices, given their understanding of the board's makeup, their finances, might, I don't want to accuse them of crossing ethical lines, but they appear somewhat abusive to me. I think if this were to have been in a litigated situation, the judge probably would not have allowed the kind of fees that were charged to them given their known budget. And so I would suggest that we also, and maybe include in the letter, or include a letter to the OAG to consider waiving any balance that exists in order to give them the ability to make use of the limited funds that they have coming in to better support the board. And so that wasn't on the work session document. If it's appropriate, I would like to add not only the letter to the board requesting that it report back, but a letter to the OAG's office requesting that they consider waiving the balance of the fees in order to give this board an opportunity to start over. So if that's appropriate, that would be my motion.
Thank you, Senator Pickard. And it looks like that request has been made before, and it was, we'll get you the information, but that was a request that was made before of the Office of the Attorney General during the last interim, and I believe there was certain reasons why the Office of the Attorney General could not move forward with granting that, but we will get the information. Our policy analyst is currently working on it to distribute it to you and to the committee members as well. But looks like it's been tried before.
Yeah, well, and we should try it until it works, I think. But I'm fine with that.
Okay, so thank you, Senator Pickard. And I think committee members, is there any questions? I think Vice Chair has a question before we move forward. Vice Chair.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank our committee counsel, Ms. Eileen O'Grady, for getting me some information. One of the things that I was concerned with, and I believe what I read is it's a Class D felony for anyone to practice homeopathic or any other type of health or healing techniques without a license. I don't know if that is the strongest that it can be. But one of the things I'd really like to see is I want to make sure that because this is expanding and the term homeopathic has taken on many forms, it's almost like, you know, you have the golden arches and then somebody who wants to imitate it has purple arches, right? And so we want to make sure that people know what they're getting. And so if that is not the stiffest penalty that other states are doing, I'd like to make sure that we look at what is the stiffest and how can we, in addition to protecting the consumer after the fact, what do we need to do that is preventative in nature so that it alerts people that everyone who says they are may not be, and the risk is just greater than cosmetic. The risk could actually be your life. So one of the things that I'm concerned with, and I don't know if you're prepared to answer that or not, or if we need to deal with that, but I'd like to see the stiffest penalties that we can get.
For the record, this is Charles Green. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Homeopathic Medical Examiners Board, and I concur with your concerns there. But remember, the only license issued is to DOs and MDs, and we go through a rigorous application efforts to make sure that those are legitimate medical doctors. We have APHs and HAs work under those licenses. We'd like to broaden that scope in the next legislature, but we certainly want to be tough and make sure that the requirements are held to a high standard.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And then I do have a question for you, Mr. Green. Did you have you previously had the conversations with the Office of the Attorney General regarding waiving the owed fees?
Again, Charles Green. No, I have not. Remember, this board was terminated in 19 and was somewhat a skeleton crew. So for a long time, there was nothing done. I walked into quite a fiasco here in trying to understand what was what, and I've audited all the way. I'm an accountant by education, so I've audited back to all the way to 2014 where I could find records, and I'm compiling that information now. And yes, the Attorney General's office has, we have applied before, but this is a new board and a new day, and the government felt it necessary to terminate the board and hire promote 4 new members. And we've got and I'm out fielding other physicians to try to bring our board membership up to 6, which is extremely important for us moving forward. We have no executive director. We have no vice president. We're missing 2 board members. So it's been somewhat of a challenge on myself putting this all together. And pretty much I haven't requested any funds at all, which at our next board meeting, I'm going to have to request some funds to pay for some of this research. But in looking at some of the alternatives that the board was up against as well, when they were thinking about transferring it to another division, was the cost of that, and that was again more than for a Class 2 assistant. The recommendations were over $45,000, and that's again $30,000 than the board even takes in. Part of the problem is no one's out promoting this board. No one's out talking about what homeopathics do. The general public doesn't have a clear understanding what even homeopathics are, but it's a medicine that's been practiced for. A system of medicine that's been practiced for 200 years, and we're one of only 2 states in the United States that has that. So I think we've got a leg up on the future here for preventative medicine, and I want to be somewhat of a catalyst to move that opportunity forward for the citizens of Nevada. I've been in Nevada 50 years. I love this state. I've graduated high school and college here. I've been in the health industry 50 years. And I think I have a lot to offer here, but nobody's really taken the ball and run with it. Most of the physicians that have been in charge here, working their practice, they're not, I'm a CEO of 4 different companies, so I'm a promoter. But I think the most important thing is that I serve my constituents, my 50 physicians, or 17 physicians and and APHs and HAs right now to service them. And one of the things we want to do is bring on some computer analytics that allow them to do a better job as a homeopath. And those opportunities are out there, and I want to make those available to the folks that are currently with us, and then use that as a tool to bring in other homeopathics in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And committee, and what I would like to do is I would like to move forward with sending a letter to the board requesting that they report back to the subcommittee during the next legislative interim regarding their composition licensing operations. And I know that we had previously said the status of its debt owed to the OAG, but because, again, this is something that we think has been previously tried before, what I would like for you to do, seeing that this is a new board, is, again, reach out to the Office of the Attorney General. So I don't necessarily think that we should send a letter to the Office of the Attorney Generals, but I think the board should reach out to the Office of the Attorney General's to work with them to see if it is a possibility of getting any of the fees waived and then report back at the next legislative interim.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I'll certainly compile a letter and talk to the AG's office and kind of go over the history with them and where we are and kind of where we want to go. And hopefully, being an accountant, I try to be fiscally responsible here. So we certainly can't pay our bills if we're stymied with debt from the AG's office. So that would be, if I could have a clear slate moving forward, that would be very good.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Committee members, I'd be looking for a motion. I have a motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Assemblywoman Marzola. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And Mr. Green, we look forward to seeing you here next interim. We're spending a lot of time together.
Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is item number C. I'm going to, under the work session document, discussion and possible recommendations relating to increasing the diversity of members in certain boards and commissions. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. During the 2019-2020 interim, the subcommittee reviewed a fraction of the existing professional and occupational regulatory bodies. As part of that review, included inquiring about the number of members who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC. To continue its education and outreach efforts after the final meeting of the 2019-2020 interim, the subcommittee voted to send a letter to certain regulatory bodies encouraging the recruitment of BIPOC members to reflect the diversity of this state. This interim, the members of the subcommittee continued their inquiry about the racial or ethnic background of persons who are appointed to Nevada's boards, commissions, or other similar entities. To address these concerns, the subcommittee may consider amending Chapter 232A of NRS, which governs appointments by the governor to public bodies, to address the appointment by the governor to certain public bodies to reflect the demographics of this state.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. Okay, committee members, it would be my recommendation, and I'd be looking for a motion for the recommendation to amend Chapter 232A of NRS to declare that it's a public policy of the state of Nevada that, except as otherwise required by law, persons appointed to the governor, by the governor to certain public bodies must, to the extent practicable, reflect the diversity of the state, including without limitation, the age, gender, sexual, ethnic, and geographic diversity of this state. Members, any questions? Vice Chair?
Yeah, so we dealt with the whole alphabets there. You said sexual, but does that include sexual identity or presentation? Oh, because we've got without limitation. So I just want to make sure that may be implied, but I just want to make sure that we include that as well because of SOGI too.
Great question, Vice Chair. I'm going to turn to our legal counsel, Ms. Grady. Would the without limitation stated in the recommendation be inclusive of everything?
It would, but we can't add that specifically. We do in other places, so we can add that.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Vice Chair, any? Okay, and then Senator Pickard, I saw you had your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. Just a question for Ms. O'Grady as well. This came up in the last legislative session as well. As we start getting into race conscious and or minority conscious decision making and certain constitutional demands or limitations on things like quotas and the like. Do we need to provide more guidance in terms of making sure that we maintain the constitutional protections that are currently in place under decisional law, or is that just assumed in the process?
This language is actually based on another statute, NRS 281.002, that relates to the same public policy in state employment. So we were just mirroring that language. It has some to the extent practicable language in there. I think it should be fine based on the, it's not making it a requirement.
All right, thank you for that. And I'm assuming the existing statute has not yet been tested at the Supreme Court level. Is that accurate?
I don't believe so. It was a 2021 statute. It was enacted in 2021.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And members, again, I would be looking for a motion to move forward with a recommendation with the addition of Vice Chair's recommendation of adding in sexual identity as well. I have a motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Assemblywoman Marzola. Any discussion on the motion? Vice Chair?
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Pickard, for bringing up that particular observation. And I want to say that, supporting this for me is not about quotas. Supporting this for me is about making sure that that everyone's voice and everyone's observation, their experience is included when we're making policy decisions, because when they are not, the voices that are missing from the table are also missing from the policy. And so I just want to make it clear that we're not talking about quotas, and I know that was something that was banted around, back in the 70s and 80s and maybe a little bit in the 90s, but we're not talking about quotas. We're really talking about making sure that there is ample space at the table for every person who is paying taxes, because what we're really talking about here, we're talking about the people that pay our salaries, and we cannot exclude them. So it's not about the quotas. It's about Nevada's 49% BIPOC right now, and it's probably even more than that after 2020 census. So we just want to make sure that all of the voices, there's an opportunity for all of the voices. And I know one of the things that was said back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when we were talking about making sure everyone has a seat at the table was, well, we probably can't find them. Yes, you can, because all you have to do is look hard enough, look wide enough, and they are there. And so people get hired not because of a particular ethnicity, a race, gender, identity. They don't get hired because of that. They get hired because of their qualifications. And incidentally, they fall under one of those categories. But if we don't put this in policy, then it's always easy for people, the escape clause for people who don't want diversity, equity, and inclusion, the escape clause for them is that, well, we couldn't find anyone, and it's never been mandated. So we're not talking about quotas. We're talking about making sure that the table is expanded, there are enough seats at the table so that everyone's life experience, everyone's perception, their voice is heard, and that is very important when we talk about public policy.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Okay, those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee. Next item is item D, discussion of recommendations to require certain boards and commissions to submit to the governor a list of names or persons qualified to be appointed to vacant board and commission positions. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. During this interim, the subcommittee members reviewed several entities and discovered that several boards and commissions possess member vacancies, some of which had not been filled in some time. To address this concern, the subcommittee may consider amending Chapter 232A to require Nevada's boards, commissions, and similar entities to submit to the governor a list of persons qualified for membership within a specified period of time after such a position becomes vacant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And committee members, this was actually something that I really wanted to move forward with and a recommendation that I really wanted to make. I think as we've heard every entity, board, and commission come before us, one of the things that we've consistently heard is that they have trouble making quorums, and so that they don't meet, and positions go unfilled or unappointed, right? And so one of the things I really wanted to do was, put the onus on the board or the entity to notify the appointing position, here, the governor's office, of a vacancy, right? And with the person who they would like to see appointed. And so instead of going in and making a change to every single commission and every single board and every single entity, if we make this one change in Chapter 232A, it would apply to everyone under the chapter. And so my recommendation, and I would be looking for a motion to amend Chapter 232A of NRS to require Nevada's boards, commissions, and similar entities to submit to the governor a list of persons qualified for membership within 60 days after such a position becomes vacant. I have a motion by Vice Chair. I have a second by Assemblywoman Kasama. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee. Okay, the last item on the work session document is agenda item number E, the discussion of recommendation to amend NRS 232B.210 to change the method of selecting the chair and vice chair of the Sunset Subcommittee. Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, says our Mogarejo Committee Policy Analyst. Nevada Revised Statute 232B.210 sets forth the makeup of the Sunset Subcommittee and establishes the requirements of the subcommittee. In addition, the NRS requires the subcommittee to meet at the time and place specified by the call of the chair. Due to these, and the statute also requires that the chair and vice chair be elected at the first meeting of the subcommittee. Due to these requirements, LCB staff generally works with the chair or vice chair from the previous legislative interim, if available, to schedule the first meeting of the interim, as well as to call the meeting to order. In the past, we've had to work, the staff has had to open the first meeting because there was no previous chair or vice chair reappointed to this subcommittee. In order to address these concerns, the subcommittee may consider amending NRS 232B.210 to require the chair of the Legislative Commission to appoint the chair and the vice chair, each representing a different house of the legislature. And this is similar to other interim committees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And I think for the efficiency of the Sunset Subcommittee in future interims, I think this is probably the best way to go. Again, it would give the new chair of the Sunset Subcommittee time before the first meeting to start working with staff so that the committee can be up and running by their first meeting instead of waiting for a chair and vice chair to be appointed. Now you are a meeting behind before working with staff on what you would like to review, what direction you would like to take. And so I would be looking for a motion to amend NRS 232B.210 to require the chair of the Legislative Commission to appoint the chair and vice chair, each representing a different house of the legislature for the Sunset Subcommittee. I have a motion by vice chair. Do I have a second? I have a second by Assemblywoman Kasama. Do I have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee, and thank you, committee members. That was our last work session for this interim. So thank you all for being here today. Our next agenda item is agenda item number 6. Mr. Malgarejo, our subcommittee policy analyst, will provide a presentation on the responses to Sunset Subcommittee Form number 3, submitted by the Department of Wildlife and the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Mr. Malgarejo, when you're ready, please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, says our Mogarejo Committee Policy Analyst. Agenda item number 6 is an overview of the responses concerning the information requested by the Sunset Subcommittee pursuant to NRS 232B.237. This statute requires the Sunset Subcommittee to collect information regarding whether the criminal history of applicants would restrict licensure and to make recommendations. In addition, there are various sections throughout the NRS that require certain regulatory bodies to develop a process for applicants to petition for a review of whether the criminal history would disqualify them for licensure. We did provide a table of all of these various NRS requirements during the January 26 meeting. This table has been uploaded to the Sunset Subcommittee overview page. And that this provides the all the regulatory bodies that are required to implement such a program and to submit information to the Sunset Subcommittee. On January 26, 2022, the Sunset Subcommittee selected to collect certain information regarding the criminal history of an applicant for an occupational professional license, specifically from the Department of Wildlife and the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to determine whether the restrictions imposed by these agencies are appropriate. In the document that was provided by staff for today's meeting, that's uploaded in our meeting material, there's a small table that provides the list of occupations and certifications and licenses that are provided by the Department of Wildlife and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Specifically from the Department of Wildlife, of the 5 occupations regulated by the department reported receiving petitions to review an applicant's criminal history for 1 hunting and fishing master guide license and 5 hunting and fishing sub-guide license. So they did not receive any applications for taxidermist, falconry, or fur dealer. 1 applicant for a hunting and fishing master guide was disqualified because of violations concerning operating a motor vehicle in a wilderness area, and 5 hunting and fishing sub-guide applicants were disqualified, 1 for not completing a hunt return card. 1 applicant was disqualified for 2 separate cases, including a conviction of criminal trespass in another state and hunting a mountain lion without a tag. 3 applicants were disqualified for the use of a trail camera during prohibited times. The Sunset Subcommittee Form number 3 also asks whether information on the licensure process and disqualifying crimes appear on the entity's website. Department of Wildlife reported that this information does appear on their website. A list of disqualifying crimes is included in the instruction documents for each of their specific licenses. Now moving on to the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. This department reported that it did not receive any petitions regarding a termination on an applicant's criminal history. The occupations regulated by the department include well driller and weather modification and control. In addition, the department has received 0 applications for a license or permit for weather modification and control pursuant to Chapter 544 of the NRS. So there hasn't been any applications for a license, period. For well drillers, details pertaining to the application and examination process for obtaining a well driller's license are available on the Division of Water and Resources website. However, it does not include a list of disqualifying crimes. According to the department, the current regulatory structure and application process does not inquire into an applicant's criminal history. Therefore, neither a list of disqualifying crimes nor a petition process has been developed, as there is currently no basis to deny an applicant based on criminal history. For weather modification and control, again, given the lack of licensing and permitting applications for weather modification, there has been no need to include any information on DCNR's website. Madam Chair, in this report from staff, I've also included additional information that's attached in attachment A and B. There's these regulatory bodies that are required to implement a program to review an applicant's criminal history are also required to submit a quarterly report to the Director of the Legislative Counsel Bureau for transmission to the Legislative Commission. These reports are supposed to be submitted on a quarterly basis, and these reports include the number of petitions submitted to the regulatory body, the number of determinations of disqualification made by the regulatory body, the reasons for such determinations, and any other information requested by the director or which the regulatory body determines will be helpful. Again, these questions are almost exactly the same questions as the subcommittee requests of the regulatory bodies during their review. So it's almost like there's a little bit of redundancy between the process the subcommittee does to review the regulatory bodies and the information that's reported on a quarterly basis. Within the legislative library, we do have reports submitted to the legislature that cover the period July 1, 2019, when the legislation was enacted, through June 30, 2021. And these reports are included in Attachment A. Reports submitted to the legislature that cover July 1, 2021 through May 16, 2022. These reports are available on Attachment B. Madam Chair, that provides all the information for this report.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. And committee members, you heard from Mr. Malgarejo and that there's a bit of duplication, and the reality is there's a quarterly requirement for this information to be sent to the legislature, but it's not. They don't send it, right? And so I do want to take action under this item because I think here at the Sunset Subcommittee, we have a little bit more of clout instead of being dependent on the agencies to send the information. We can request it and they have to fill it out and come before Sunset Subcommittee and send this information. And I'd like for that to continue, similar to how we review entities, boards, and commissions. I think I'd like to leave the authority with the Sunset Subcommittee for us to request this information because I think it's important information and they aren't sending it quarterly as they are required. And so I would like, as a chair, to take action under this agenda item to remove the requirement for the regulatory bodies to submit a quarterly report and leave the requirement for the Sunset Subcommittee to request at every future interim agencies to review this information for. And so I'm going to turn it over. It looks like Assemblywoman Kasama has a question.
Just a thought for me to understand better. Is quarterly too much for the departments? Is it better to have it annually if we're making this change, or semi-annually?
That's a great question. And Mr. Malgarejo, I don't know if you can answer that question, but has it been your experience that we're just not getting these from the agencies, or?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Community Policy Analyst. So there is a couple entities that have been very active. Southern Nevada Health District has been very active, and they are submitting these quarterly reports as required. And so is the Department of Agriculture. And there's been additional entities that have submitted this report during the 2021 calendar year. I have heard from certain entities that have reported they just weren't aware that this information was required. But again, the information is reported to the legislature and is transmitted to the Legislative Commission. Nothing has happened with this information. But again, this is the exact same information that they report is the exact same information that the Sunset Subcommittee considers. And one thing to consider is because the Sunset Subcommittee requested DCNR to provide this information, we were made aware of that the well drillers, there's no criminal violations that impact getting a license by well drillers. And then so just to confirm the chair's statement, I think it's more proactive for the Sunset Subcommittee to review this information because we're able to have that conversation with them directly, and staff is able to explain to them exactly what information we are requesting, or the Sunset Subcommittee is requesting.
And I would add to that we have the authority to take action too, that we can make recommendations based on the information we receive and statutory recommendations. And so this is putting a little bit more work on future Sunset Subcommittees and Sunset Subcommittee staff, but I think there's benefit in requiring Sunset Subcommittee to review a certain amount of, and Mr. Malgarejo, I'm going to lean on you for this, but are we currently required to review a certain amount of entities? And if not, I'd like to put that in the motion that future Sunset Subcommittees are required to review a minimum of, I think, 5 agencies, if that's not too much, 5 agencies for to require them to fill out form number 3. Do you know if we currently are required to review a certain number?
For the record, Cesar Margarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. I do not believe that there's a specific requirement for the Sunset Committee to review a certain amount of entities, and I don't believe the legislation also specifies how often we're supposed to be reviewing. I think at the beginning of the interim, you decided to specifically ask this information from the Department of Wildlife and DCNR, but I don't believe there's a specific requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Margarejo. Subcommittee, again, I think we should, again, creating more work for future sunset subcommittees, but I think it's important that that we make a motion that this committee review them at every sunset subcommittee, at every interim, maybe add that into statute and add in a number of agencies that they have to review so that we make sure, just like with the boards, commission entities, that we're getting through the list of everyone, and that if they're not submitting their reports like they're supposed to, that at least Sunset Subcommittee is holding them accountable and reviewing the information and making the recommendations to the legislative commissions for any statutory changes that maybe need to be made. And so I know Vice Chair has a question. Oh, and I'm sorry, Assemblywoman Kasama, I don't think we finished answering your question, so I'm going to come back to you. Do you have any other questions? Or?
It's still just following up. Is quarterly too much? Should it be semi-annually or annually? That's my question. I don't have a sense for it, so I'm just looking for, I guess, recommendation from staff. What would be reasonable for the departments or agencies?
Yeah, and I think that's really up for like us as a committee to decide. Do we want to leave it? Do we want to leave the not quarterly? We'll leave the quarterly reports in there that they have to proactively send it to the Leg Commission and maybe reduce the number. Or do we want to transfer the responsibility to the Sunset Subcommittee and have them request the information? I think that's really for our.
Right, I'm just sensitive. It seems like every department is short-staffed.
100.
They're overwhelmed, and so, it's important for us to get this information. The question is, how often should we get it? What would be reasonable?
Correct. And then Vice Chair?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, overall, the information that we request, and I support your recommendation. I just know the last 2 times that I've participated on Sunset Committee, we can request the information from the boards and the commissions, but rarely do we get everyone to respond, which is why I had the bill last time to put teeth into it. If they don't respond, then the governor has the ability to freeze their funds, and so they can't use anything because the information that we're getting is important information. And I think sometimes, even though the financial stability of the board or the commission, the board especially, comes from the members or from the licensees, even though that is the case, if they do something that is outside of the legal boundaries and they get sued, they don't sue that board, they sue that board of the state of Nevada. And so I think it's important for us to get the information, and I think that it's important for every board that's the state of Nevada board of fill in the blank, has to recognize that when the rubber meets the road, it's the state of Nevada that's on the line and not necessarily the ED or some of the members. And so getting this information is very important, and whatever we need to do to make sure that they understand that instead of just flipping it off, I think we should do that. So if the Sunset Committee requests it, there probably should be some type of a BDR in place that puts teeth in it. So because they should be submitting it when we request it, but many times, and I was horrified last time. I think we got less than maybe 10-15% of the boards that responded, and they just kind of say, "Well, we don't have to." Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's the state board of what, and you're using the name of Nevada. And so unless they want to be the ones that foot the bill, because when they don't do the right thing, it's the taxpayers of Nevada that are on the line. So these reports are very important, and whatever we need to do to put teeth in them to make sure that they respond, I think we should do that too.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And Senator Pickard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I could not have hoped to say it as well as Senator Spearman just did. I completely agree with the idea that we should put teeth in the reporting requirements. In fact, my idea or my thought is that we should, I certainly understand we don't need to swamp staff with reports that are largely ignored. I think that's a mistake. I think reducing the numbers maybe to an annual report would be appropriate. But I certainly don't want to eliminate the requirement for a report, because that means that Sunset Subcommittee staff and members have to be aware of everything. And we're a citizen legislature. We have other interests and requirements on our time. We're not going to be paying that broad attention to so many disparate and various entities and their reports. So a lot can fall, through the cracks. It can go unnoticed if we aren't actively looking for it. However, if we get a report that then, as we look at it, because it's required to come in, we can, staff can alert us to certain obvious problems and maybe some not so obvious problems. And then we can, as a subcommittee, decide whether or not we want to address it. But if we leave it up to the subcommittee to do all of the investigation on our own initiative, I think that we're putting a lot of stock or a lot of faith into a body that we have no idea who's going to be on the subcommittee. I think that we should maintain the requirements for the reports on at least an annual basis that then staff can cull through and help the committee understand. And I certainly support the idea that an administrative body, in fact, whether that be within the judiciary or the executive branch, needs to be responsive to the legislative branch. Ultimately, we represent the people, and we are the check that protects them. So if we're not doing an adequate job through either our own busy schedules and so we miss things, or maybe we're not, we don't have people that are driving the boat that are really as engaged as our current leadership is, I think that it does a disservice to our constituents, to our citizens. So I would think that I would certainly support Senator Spearman's notion of putting teeth in the reporting requirements and holding individuals accountable for not providing that, as opposed to just the state broadly, as she mentioned. But also, I think we should maintain a reporting requirement of at least an annual basis, so that we are less likely to let things fall through the cracks.
Thank you, Senator Pickard. And no, I agree with Assemblywoman Kasama's thought process that many of our state agencies are operating with such a high vacancy. And unfortunately, Senator Pickard, the Sunset Subcommittee doesn't get the reports that are required to come in quarterly. Those don't come to us or to our staff. Those are sent to Ledge Commission. And so we never actually get to see those, and they don't come to our staff either. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that we and future Sunset Subcommittees had the authority and responsibility, because the reality is in its first year of implementation, only 2 agencies. So we're not missing out on anything because nobody's sending them in. We had 2 agencies report in, and in the following years, I think it was 4 agencies in the last 2 years, that sent them in. So nobody's sending these reports in, and so the requirements there for them to send them to the Ledge Commission, and nobody's doing it. Ledge Commission's getting them. There's nothing coming up from it, and so I do want to put the onus on future Sunset Subcommittees to be proactive and request this information and get it and review it. It's the job we were elected to do, to make sure that we are performing the functions of the committees that we sit on. And so I would like to make a
Madam Chair,
recommendation.
can I just make a suggestion?
Oh, let me finish,
there?
Senator Pickard. And so I would like, to make a change so that the onus isn't on the severely understaffed state agencies to have to do a report every single year if they don't need to, and if it's not going to be reviewed or by anyone, but to have the Sunset Subcommittee select the agencies, just like we select the boards and commissions that we want to review, so that we make sure that we're getting through the full list of everyone. Put the onus on future Sunset Subcommittees to request these forms from agencies who haven't filled them out before and review them and make recommendations to the Ledge Commission. And I agree. I think I don't think we have the time right now to discuss and figure out what that enforcement mechanism is going to be. But I agree, and I think it's something that we need to look at and bring during session to have an enforcement mechanism to require these agencies that when the Sunset Subcommittee requests the information that they provided. And so, again, I will restate my motion when we get to that point. I just wanted to add in my comments. And Senator Pickard, if you'd like to jump in now.
Sure, and I agree with what you were saying in terms of impetus to jump back in and to request the responses. I completely agree. But as a subcommittee of the Legislative Commission, it may be simply an internal thing that we can deal with to make sure that we are getting those reports. I recognize that often subcommittees are populated by members of the broader committee, and that's not the case here. But I want to make sure that we're not putting more on the Sunset Subcommittee's plate than they can manage. We talk about being understaffed in certain agencies. I would imagine that if we expand our mission significantly to now be reviewing agencies that we haven't historically reviewed, that's going to put more pressure on an already overwhelmed staff. But I agree with the impulse. I think that it's wise. I just want to caution against putting too much faith in people we don't know who are sitting in the chairs.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think it's going to be for future Sunset Subcommittee members to decide what the composition of reviews looks like. So whether I think the Sunset Subcommittee has always reviewed about 20 boards and commissions, and so maybe that goes down to 15 boards and commissions and 5 agencies for this form, right? Last interim could have been due to COVID, but we only reviewed, I think, about 10 agencies, boards, and commissions, and at other Sunset Subcommittee, there's 20, so it's always at the discretion of what that committee chair and vice chair are willing to do. And so I think again, we shouldn't discount what the future Sunset Subcommittees look like, and I think we do a very good job at reviewing the boards, commissions, and agencies that come before us and selecting them. And so I think I don't think that we can leave it to the agencies to submit a form because they've proven to not do it. And I think we need to request it from them through this committee and then take action as for enforcement if they don't respond, just like we would with a board if they don't come and present in front of us when requested. Okay.
Thank you. If I can just ask a quick question of Ms. O'Grady.
Yes, Mr. Pickard, please.
Thank you. Ms. O'Grady, I'd have to go back and look at the statutory language for the subcommittee, but it seems to me we are limited in authority to reviewing the regulatory boards. Do we also have the statutory authority to regulate any other executive agencies?
The statutory authority for the subcommittee is a review of each board and commission in the state which is not provided for in the Constitution or established by executive order. So that's the general authority of the Sunset Subcommittee. And then there's a specific statute that we're talking about on the criminal history that just talks about a general review of each professional or occupational licensing board and regulatory body. And that has the meaning that's in NRS 622.060, and I think that's just the Title 54 boards. So there's two different statutes dealing with, general review and then one of the criminal history.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. And so again, I would like to restate my recommendation, and I appreciate everyone, participating in the discussion. And again, this is at my recommendation after just seeing through this committee what has been coming into the state, what hasn't been coming into the state, and what I would like to see come into the state in terms of reports. I think this is an important issue. I think we all agree on that. And so I would like for us as a committee to take action under this agenda item to remove the requirement for the regulatory bodies to submit a quarterly report and leave the requirement in, so this is already a requirement of the Sunset Subcommittee, leave the requirement in for the Sunset Subcommittee to request and review this information every interim and to select a minimum of 3 agencies to review every interim. I have a motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second? I have a second by Assembly Member Kasama. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have Senator Pickard in a nay. Motion carries. Thank you, committee members. That was the last item before we get to public comment. So I would like to remind everyone that I will start with those present here in Las Vegas. I will head to Carson City and then check the telephone lines. So we are at agenda item number 7, public comment. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment? Seeing none, is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment? Seeing none, VPS, could we please check the telephone lines for anyone wishing to provide public comment?
Thank you, Chair. Your public line is open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
Okay. Well, then, committee, that brings us to agenda item number 8. Is there any comments from committee members? This is our last meeting. Any comments committee members would like to add? Assemblywoman Kasama?
I'd just like to thank you, Chair. I think you've done a great job of chairing the committee, and appreciate your work on it. I know you've put a lot of work into it, and just appreciate your chairing this, and our Vice Chair as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Kasama. Members, any comments before we adjourn? Oh, Vice Chair, yes.
Yeah, I just want to echo those comments and also extend them to our staff who work diligently behind the scenes. Every time you see the camera move, somebody's moving the camera and somebody's taking notes. Somebody will transcribe the notes. So I want to say thank you to them and to all the members of this committee. Sometimes the discussions get a little heated, but I think that's what democracy looks like. So thank you, everyone, and have a great summer.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, members? Okay. Well, I do just want to take a moment to make some comments as well. I want to take a moment to thank the committee members. It's been an honor serving as your chair and a privilege to work alongside of you as we do the important work that we were assigned to do of this committee. It's not easy reading through a series of reports every single committee meeting, but I've always enjoyed it. I like the inside look into the boards, the commissions that oversee and hire things that are so important to our state, especially our occupational licensing boards, right? They are the ones who hire and govern big occupations in our state, and for us to be able to be a part of that, I think it's so important. And I appreciate your thoughtful suggestions and input during every meeting. I echo what Vice Chair said. You know, these discussions can get heated, but that's part of the job, and that's what we do. We ask questions, we talk about things, and then we make decisions. And finally, I want to thank the legislative staff that make this committee operate as well as we do. We all know that it's not us making this thing run as efficiently as it does. From preparing our legislative hearings, to legal and policy analysis, to the techs working from video and audio feeds that provide the literal connection between government and the public. Every one of them they're really the unsung servants of the people. And so I and my fellow committee members want to sing your praises for just a moment. And on behalf of the people and the communities we serve, to all of the staff of this committee, we say thank you. So thank you. We appreciate you, and we couldn't have done this without you guys. So committee members, with that, our meeting is adjourned, and everyone have a wonderful summer. Thank you.